Welcome to WhiskyCast, cast strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie, and this is episode number 1168 for June 28th, 2026. Coming up in a few minutes.
It's frankly one of the more unique blends we've ever created. It's fascinating, some of the flavors, the cinnamon and the sweet that comes through in it, at least on my palate.
This Wednesday, an unusual collaboration will be released at MB Roland Distillery in Pembroke, Kentucky, and Liberty Pole Spirits in Washington, Pennsylvania. They each blended their Pennsylvania Rye and Kentucky Bourbon to create two unique whiskies called Penntucky and Kentsylvania. Paul Tomaszewski and Jim Hough will join me later on WhiskyCast In-Depth to discuss the collaboration, and I'll taste both whiskeys too. The news is next on this week's WhiskyCast, whiskey's longest-running and most awarded podcast series.
Hey friends, it's Gabriel with Jewers here. If you're watching the U.S. Open this year, or you've got Father's Day coming up and you just want to get it right, there's a bottle that I would keep an eye out for. I'll explain.
Let's get started with the week's news. Wyoming Whiskey was sold this week. Edrington sold its 80% stake in the distillery and brand back to co-founder David DeFazio and an investor group. The purchase price was undisclosed, but is said to be a lot less than Edrington paid for Wyoming Whiskey back in 2018. In an exclusive interview after the sale was announced, David DeFazio told me he was afraid the brand might not survive unless he stepped up. So why buy Wyoming Whiskey back, given that bourbon is in a downturn?
Well, that's a great question. That's a loaded question, Mark. It presents an opportunity for me and our investment group. So while it may be, consumption may be at a 90-year low, it does present an opportunity when it comes to the acquisition or reacquisition of a company like Wyoming Whiskey.
What went into reacquiring it?
You want the short answer or the long answer?
Give me the long answer.
Well, there were a number of things that happened in the last many months that led to an opportunity for me and our investor group to approach Edrington with an offer to buy. And we believe, obviously, we wouldn't be doing this if we didn't think we could improve upon the current state of affairs with Wyoming Whiskey. And, this is the type of company that belongs in local Wyoming hands. And, small companies need to be run by people who can be nimble and creative and don't have tight guardrails and don't have over conservative views of things. And, just stuff like that. And I think large corporations sometimes just don't have the ability to do those things. And so the company has luckily found itself back in the hands of people who care. I mean, I am as passionate about this brand. I'm more passionate about this brand than anybody ever. So I won't let it fail. And our investment group has put some faith in me that I'll be able to do this. And alongside JP Correa, who used to work for Edrington, I'm going to be working really closely with him. He always did a fantastic job for our brand when he was brand manager there. And so he and I will be working very closely to grow this and, really make smart decisions when it comes to distribution and new product development. And, I would say the tactical deployment of capital. What's the ROI on things going to be? Don't just spend to spend. And, all the just fundamental building blocks of business that, we can apply and hopefully will reap benefits from.
It seems to me, looking at it from the outside, like Wyoming Whiskey was always a bit of an outsider within Edrington. Is that the case?
I can't comment on that. I don't know. I don't know how they looked at it. We're not a Scotch, so obviously we were different in that sense, but I can't really say one way or another whether or not they viewed us as an outsider or not. I didn't think so. I mean, I was never told that, But what happened in their boardrooms is still a mystery to me.
You brought Nancy Fraley back on board. What does that mean for the brand?
It's exciting. It's really exciting. Having the flexibility to bring in a consultant on a part-time basis obviously saves a bunch of money. But bringing someone of her caliber in is a huge plus for us. I mean, that's an asset that we have always leaned on in the past, and obviously got away from her for about 3 years. We had brought in a full-time person who did a great job for us, candidly, but just can't justify a full-time salary in that position. So getting the best back. I mean, I've always looked at Nancy as the best in the business, and I think most people would agree. And getting her involved now in a way that is going to be incredibly meaningful when it comes to new product development, studying our existing stock, letting the stock tell us what to do with it, as opposed to trying to make things that may or may not make sense for the liquid that we have aging in our warehouses. Just a very practical approach. And I have the utmost trust in Nancy. I mean, she's the best. We work great together. And it's always fun to sit down with her after a blending session at the Cowboy Bar on the town square, and she'll drink the coldest light beer imaginable, and I'll join her. And it's just fun to talk through this stuff with her. She's incredibly creative and obviously brilliant, and possesses a superpower that the rest of us don't. So it's great to have her back.
What other changes will we see?
Well, Mark, this just closed obviously on Wednesday, and I would say 80 to 90% of our bandwidth went into the acquisition process and working with our M&A attorneys and working through. There's so much to do right now with transition, with TTB and the Wyoming Liquor Division and distribution across the country. I guess that would be a good place to start. We're going to have to change our distribution network. And I just got off the phone with JP before I jumped on with you, and we're talking through which states do we want to continue to distribute in? What makes sense? Obviously, there are a number of states that just never really caught for us for one reason or another. And so we're going to be eliminating a number of those states. But the states we choose to remain in, we're going to need to make a really informed decision on which distributor to use. And I don't believe you're going to see us going with big companies like Southern, because we get lost in companies like that. Even with Edrington, we got lost oftentimes. And so we're going to need to make really good decisions on distribution. So you're going to see changes there. I would say that's going to be the most fundamental change when it comes to how we get to market.
Anything else you can add I didn't ask about?
I'm excited. This isn't what I expected to be happening in June of 2026. Obviously, I mean, I guess that's not obvious. I didn't foresee a reacquisition in my future, and just through numerous factors and forces, the downturn in the alcohol industry being a huge one, and a number of other things that we don't necessarily need to get into here, it presented an opportunity. And if I didn't avail myself on the opportunity, then I would have been fearful for the future of the brand. And there's no way I could let this brand go away. So when this opportunity came up, I called JP, and we decided to call a gentleman by the name of Jerry Sylvie, and he's leading the investor group. And there are going to be tremendous opportunities that are going to come our way as a result of that. And so you're going to see us availing ourselves on those opportunities that maybe weren't seized upon earlier for whatever reasons. And that's the beauty of a small company, right? Is you can evaluate something. You don't have any politics involved. You don't have any whatever involved that might influence an otherwise good decision. And so with Jerry and JP and Kit Decker, we're going to be able to look at things through a very clear lens and decide whether or not it is worth it to do or not. And in addition to that, we want to be really strong contributors to this community, to Jackson, to Wyoming in total. And we want to represent Wyoming as good as possible. We want everybody in Wyoming to be proud of what we're doing. And I think a lot of people, I know a lot of people have reached out to me in the last 48 hours, expressing their support for what we're doing and their excitement that we're bringing it back to Wyoming. And I've been saying Wyoming whiskey's coming home. And that means a lot to me, and it means a lot to the people in our company. And it means a lot to the folks who've been supporting us, all the retailers, all the liquor stores, the Cowboy Bar, the Bistro. I mean, all these different places that have been huge supporters of ours, I think are going to be really psyched to see what we do and with how we work with them in the future. And then nationally, we're paying attention. So if anybody's interested in talking to us, you can find me or you can find JP and we'll work with you. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Wyoming Whiskey's other co-founders, Brad and Kate Mead, retained a small percentage of ownership after the sale to Edrington, but are not involved with the day-to-day operations of the distillery. Turning now to Ireland, where Bacardi has taken full ownership of Teeling Whiskey Company. Bacardi has been gradually increasing its ownership stake in Teeling since acquiring a minority stake in 2017 and becoming the majority owner in 2022. Founders Jack and Stephen Teeling will stay on as strategic advisors. The Colesveen family is celebrating the opening of Willett's new distillery in Springfield, Kentucky. Most of Willett's distilling will take place in Springfield, but bottling, warehousing, and the visitor operations will remain in Bardstown. A visitor center is planned for the new distillery in the future. They filled the first barrel on June 18th, the birthday of the late Martha Willett Colesveen. Four Roses is jumping on the experimental bandwagon with a new Mizunara finished bourbon. Master distiller Brent Elliott had been working on the project long before the distillery was sold to Gallo earlier this year. It features a 6-year-old OBSK recipe bourbon and will be available exclusively at the Four Roses Visitor Center in Lawrenceburg, Kentucky, starting Tuesday for $55 a bottle. It's not being billed as an experimental release, but Bulleit has been working on pushing the envelope for aging rye whiskey. The result is a 20-year-old Bulleit rye with just 1,776 bottles available starting in July at the Bulleit Distillery in Shelbyville, Kentucky, and select markets. The price tag, $299 a bottle. Heaven Hill is releasing its spring edition of Old Fitzgerald Bottled in Bond Decanter Series. It's a 10-year-old whiskey distilled in the spring season of 2016 and will be priced at $149.99 a bottle. Washington State's Woodinville Distillery is rolling out 7-year-old single-barrel cask-strength bourbon and rye whiskeys. They're an outgrowth of the distillery's single-barrel program for retailers and whiskey clubs. The whiskeys will be available at retailers throughout the U.S. and online at Woodinville Whiskey's website, along with their tasting rooms in Woodinville and Quincy, Washington. Jim Beam is touting its partnership with the new Cadillac Formula One team and is releasing a new commemorative bottle in time for the British Grand Prix at Silverstone next month. The Jim Beam and Cad F1 limited edition bottle will be available first at Silverstone before being rolled out globally. It'll hit the U.S. in September. No word on pricing. Beam is also rolling out commemorative editions of Knob Creek, Jim Beam, and Maker's Mark for America's 250th anniversary. The Knob Creek Independence Edition includes a blue wax seal and red, white, and blue labeling. In Scotland now, Isle of Raasay is releasing its latest Nasia Single Cask Series single malts. It's a milestone for the distillery with its first 7-year age statement. The whiskies were aged in American rye casks and come in peated and unpeated versions. They're component whiskies to Raasay's flagship single malt, the Dram, and sell for £80 each in the UK. Highland Park has a new addition to its travel retail lineup. Light of Orkney is an 11-year-old single malt. It comes from a combination of sherry-seasoned European oak and American oak casks. There's no word on pricing. And finally, Japan's Kiyakawa Distillery has teamed up with Decanta to mark the retailer's 11th anniversary. They're releasing only the second official bottling from Kiyakawa, a single cask that was the 11th cask ever filled at the distillery. It's a Marsala cask that produced just 348 bottles. The price tag, $319.99 a bottle. You can keep up with the latest whiskey news all week long at whiskycast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app. Let's check the calendar now and see what's happening around the world of whiskey. Julio's Liquors in Westboro, Massachusetts, has a Whiskey Wednesday tasting this week with the folks from Clyde May's Alabama Whiskey. Next Tuesday, July 7th, the Kensington Wine Market in Calgary, Alberta, has a House of Doers limited editions tasting, followed by an Arran Whiskey tasting on the 14th. The Aberdeen Whiskey Shop in Aberdeen, Scotland, has a tasting featuring whiskies from the independent bottler Woodrow's of Edinburgh on Thursday, July 9th. Sagamore Spirit Distillery in Baltimore, Maryland, has its next Whiskey on the Waterfront party, July 18th. And finally, Moonshine University's next Stave and Thief Society Executive Bourbon Steward course is on Friday, July 24th in Louisville, Kentucky. If you're organizing a whiskey event, let us know about it. We'll add it to the calendars at whiskycast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app.
Every year, we've been releasing a Dewar's 19-Year-Old Champions Edition alongside the U.S. Open, a limited-release whiskey that's directly tied to the tournament. Now, 19 years is not a number you see every day on a bottle of whiskey, but in golf it kind of makes sense. The 19th hole, that round after the round. Well, the stories usually are a little better than some folks' scorecards. This year, the championships at Shinnecock Hills in Long Island, and instead of just putting that on the label and calling it a day, we build it into the whiskey. After 19 years of maturation, this whiskey's finished in Cabernet Franc wine casks from Wolfer Estate, right there on Long Island. So there's a real connection to the place, not just in name, but in the liquid itself. On the palate, you'll get some of that red fruit, with a bit of floral lift and a touch of spice from the higher ABV, but it still drinks like Dewar's. Honeyed, soft oak, balanced, nothing is out of place. It also lands right around Father's Day, making it an easy gift. Limited release, once a year, with Shinnecock Hills on the bottle. Great for golf fans, but just really a well-made whiskey. Keep an eye out for it. Copyright 2026, Dewar's is a trademark. Imported by John Dewar & Sons Company, Coral Gables, Florida. Blended Scotch whiskey, 43% alcohol by volume.
WhiskyCast In-Depth is brought to you by Glendalough Irish Whiskey. Pennsylvania Rye whiskey was a thing long before Kentucky farmers started making bourbon. It was Pennsylvania's rye farmer distillers who started the Whiskey Rebellion in 1794, and eventually some of them moved to Kentucky and started growing corn, which led to the rise of bourbon. Pennsylvania Rye was popular right up until Prohibition, when most of the state's distilleries were forced to close. A handful reopened after Prohibition, only to fail in the 1950s and 60s because of changing consumer tastes. Today, Pennsylvania Rye is in the hands of craft distillers like Jim Hough of Liberty Pole Spirits in Washington, Pennsylvania, home of the Whiskey Rebellion. Paul Tomaszewski and his wife Mary Beth started M.B. Roland Distillery in Pembroke, Kentucky, back in 2009 to make bourbon. What do these two have in common? Well, Paul taught Jim and his family how to make whiskey at a distilling class many years ago, and now they've collaborated on a pair of unique whiskeys that blend Liberty Pole's Pennsylvania Rye with M.B. Roland's Kentucky Bourbon. Paul and Jim each blended their own version. Kentsylvania is Paul's more bourbon-forward creation, while Penntucky is Jim's rye-forward version. I'll have my tasting notes for both whiskeys in a few minutes, but first let's hear more about the project from Jim and Paul. We talked this week on a Zoom call. Where did the idea for this collaboration come from?
Paul was on his way back from a Veterans Day whiskey tasting in New York, and we kind of go way back, and Paul hadn't been to our new facility, so driving back to Kentucky, he offered to swing by, and we were excited to host him. And at that point, we had just done a small collaboration with Dad's Hat, and we got to talking, and Paul sort of said, well, why don't we do a collaboration of Kentucky Bourbon and Pennsylvania Rye? And, the idea was born last summer.
Paul, what does this collaboration mean to you?
It definitely, well, it's our first formal collaboration. So just the process has been a good experience working with Liberty Pole and Jim. We're kind of family-ish because we've known each other for so long. I did a little instructional class years ago, not anymore, but they actually attended it, and then they started their distillery afterwards. So it's been well over 10 years. I think at this point I've known them, and seeing their distillery and their business grow as well as ours kind of at the same time, and that whole historical tie-in of the Pennsylvania Rye and Kentucky Bourbon. I'm sure someone has blended it maybe on accident, or some tavern keeper in a saloon somewhere. But as far as the bottling goes, I think this is the first combination of that type in history.
Now, you each did your own separate takes on this with Kentsylvania and Penntucky Rye whiskies, and tell me about the what each of you did with your specific blend.
Well, so, and Paul, I don't want to speak for you, but I do believe that our respective styles kind of shine through in the blends that we created. We're primarily a rye distillery, although we do make bourbons. And so our palates tend to kind of move towards, those traditional rye, herbal, spicier notes. And I think our blend kind of maybe showcases the rye component of the blend a little bit, while Paul, and I'll let you speak next. I feel like Paul's definitely has more of the bourbon kind of flair to it.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a exercise in blending, because of course we chose the barrels, and in our case, the barrel that we chose, we played with quite a few different blends with it, because you don't know what you're going to get on a blend a lot of times till it happens. But in the case of their rye, like he was saying, in their blend, it pops more. But the difficulty for us was bourbon is sweeter and not as aggressive in some of those notes. So we really focused on trying to find that combination where that sweetness stood up. And I don't want to get too much, I guess, into the flavor, but I mean, it is, I think our blend is very well representative of both the rye and the bourbon. And it's frankly one of the more unique blends we've ever created. It's fascinating, some of the flavors, the cinnamon and the sweet that comes through in it, at least on my palate.
Paul, for those who are not familiar with Pennsylvania Rye, tell me about what makes it so unique.
Well, I'm going to defer to Jim.
I'm sorry, I meant to say Jim.
Pennsylvania Rye, we're starting to have our moment. It's been a long time coming. There's been, a few distilleries that have been around a bit longer than us that have, kind of really sought to reintroduce Pennsylvania Rye to the whiskey world. Dad's Hat and Wiggle are two that come to mind that have been around longer than us. But, in our, kind of in our minds and kind of based on our research, Pennsylvania Rye is different than other ryes in the sense that, we look at it as having a traditionally high rye mash bill, and most importantly, lack of corn. I don't know if you've ever met Sam Komlenik, but he's a whiskey historian. He talks about an advertisement for a pre-prohibition rye that he uncovered in his research, and the rye said, "Our rye contains no corn or other poisons." Distillers back then in Pennsylvania did not like corn in their whiskeys. So in our, kind of what I think makes Pennsylvania rye unique is the very high rye mash bill, upwards of 70%, and a lack of corn. And of course, all the other, pot or batch distilled, low barrel entry proof. Pennsylvania ryes just typically hit a little bit different than a lot of the ryes that are on the market. They're a little bit more herbally. They're not as bold or spicy as the 95.5 ryes that a lot of people are used to.
What are your plans for releasing this on Wednesday, I believe?
Well, we're doing a simultaneous release at each of our respective distilleries, as well as a live stream that evening, 7 o'clock Central, 8 o'clock Eastern, with a whole bunch of media entities tied together. And I know there'll be kind of a watch party or a little event at each place, and so folks will be able to. We'll have enough product on hand at both distilleries where you can taste both of them, but on the bottle side, that's obviously you're going to have to go to the respective distillery, or you can go online. In our case, I think we're going to put it on there during the live stream or make it available, and you'll be able to buy either bottle on our online shop, as well as the same thing for Liberty Pole's online store.
Was this a fun collaboration?
Oh yeah. It was, it really was. I mean, we have a really good relationship, a long time relationship with Paul and the team there. And, it was a lot of fun, tasting through their barrels and trying to blend with ours. Really good people. I think that's why we get along so well. A lot of fun.
When I stopped at Jim's place on my way back from New York, of course, I'm driving and we're on a schedule, and I was with my lead distiller, Nick, and I'm like, all right, we got an hour or whatever, and we need to get back on the road. I think we were there for 5 hours.
Pretty much, yeah.
Now, we were very well behaved on the consumption side. We're pros. We know how to, be responsible, but it was just a lot of time spent talking, reminiscing, and with Jim's team, which is an extension of his family, with his sons working there and Ellen there, and then with my team, we've done Zoom calls and phone calls and stuff like that together. It's been a true collaboration of both of our teams for this effort, and that's from beginning to end, from the process of creating the blends, the logistics of it all, which isn't too complicated, but it takes time and a little bit of effort. And then the blending, and now the media side of it. It's been a fun process. I'm sure we'll do another one. So hopefully it sells out. We'll have an excuse to do that pretty quick.
Heck yeah.
Once again, the whiskeys go on sale this Wednesday at Liberty Pole Spirits in Washington, Pennsylvania, and M.B. Roland Distillery in Pembroke, Kentucky. Thanks to Paul Tomaszewski and Jim Hough for joining us this week on WhiskyCast In-Depth. It's brought to you by Glendalough Irish Whiskey.
Our story begins in the wilds of County Wicklow, the Garden of Ireland, a place where nature moves slowly and meaningfully. Some whiskies blend in. Glendalough Double Barrel stands apart. I'm Rowdy Rooney, head distiller here at Glendalough, and I personally oversee our whiskey making process from start to finish. We do things slowly, and we do them right. We start with a smooth, single-grain Irish whiskey. We age it in flame-charred American oak for soft vanilla and a honeyed depth. Then we finish it in Oloroso casks from a small bodega in Spain. Casks we season and ship ourselves to make sure the wood is still alive with character when it arrives. That kind of care gives Glendalough Double Barrel its rich layers of dried fruit, warm spice and signature smoothness. This is a whiskey at its own pace. and it's worth every second. This is Glendalough Double Barrel, crafted to stand apart.
This week's tasting notes are brought to you by Lost Lantern Whiskey. Let's start with the Penntucky American Whiskey, Jim Hough's rye forward version. It's bottled at 52.8% ABV. The nose has baking spices, dark chocolate, caramel, and pipe tobacco. The taste is spicy and bold with clove, cinnamon, and allspice notes, complemented by dark chocolate, honey, vanilla, and a hint of pipe tobacco. The finish is long and spicy, and I'm scoring it a 92. Paul Tomaszewski's Kentsylvania is the bourbon forward version, bottled at a higher strength, 54.1% ABV. The bourbon influence is clear on the nose, with caramel, soft spices, dried fruits, honey, and vanilla. The taste is creamy and smooth with a slow onset of black pepper, balanced by honey and vanilla notes. The finish is long and peppery. I'm also scoring this one a 92. Both represent an interesting exercise in collaboration between a pair of whiskey makers. This week's tasting notes are brought to you by Lost Lantern Whiskey, with a groundbreaking first-ever blend of straight bourbons from all 50 states. At a time when bourbon is being made everywhere from Alaska to Hawaii, Vermont to Texas, the United States of Bourbon captures a remarkable moment in American whiskey history. Years in the making, this release is bottled at 100 proof and cask strength, along with a special United States of Bourbon 1776 edition featuring whiskies from the original 13 states. Find out more at lostlanternwhiskey.com. Lost Lantern, shining a light on the independent spirit. Let's open up the inbox now and see what people are talking about this week. Had a couple of comments on last week's interview with Eddie and Bruce Russell. Arya Gupta posted this on X. 45 years of craft is the part I always wanted documented. Process notes, boring decisions, all the stuff that actually makes the thing. Pete at Whiskey Ranked posted this note in the WhiskyCast community app. Great episode. Unfortunately, the Eddie Russell movie isn't showing in D.C. And Hugo Dart posted in the app from Brazil. Your interview with Eddie and Bruce touched on what seems to be a recurring theme. The notion that a generation of whiskey makers who only cared about the quality of the juice is being succeeded by one that, for better or for worse, places a lot of importance on presentation. On the sale of Wyoming Whiskey back to co-founder David DeFazio and an investor group, Bill Ricker posted this in the app. Interesting timing. I suspect the locals got a discount off peak bubble valuations. While the purchase price wasn't disclosed, I understand that it was a lot less than Edrington originally paid for that 80% stake in 2018. And finally, some sage advice from Justin Grant in the app. Sometimes it pays to step outside your comfort zone. Stopped into a gas station I've passed hundreds of times before. Almost walked out after not finding anything. Then out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of an Elmer T. Lee behind the counter. I've said it before, it always pays to step out of your comfort zone once in a while. If you have something you'd like to share with whiskey lovers from around the world, download the free WhiskyCast community app from your app store and join the conversation. That's all for this edition of WhiskyCast. Behind the Label will return next week. You'll find links for the stories in this episode in our show notes at whiskycast.com. That's also where you'll find the calendar of events, my tasting notes, and a complete archive of past episodes going all the way back to 2005. Don't forget to leave a review or comment in your favorite podcast app, and be sure to hit the like button. That helps other whiskey lovers discover the show. We'd love to hear from you. Look for WhiskyCast on all of the major social media apps. Our email address is comments@whiskycast.com.
Our latest release of Dewar's 19-year-old Champions Edition, finished in Cabernet Franc wine casks, made for the 19th hole, and one worth having around when you get there. Keep an eye out for it. Cheers, friends.
WhiskyCast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2026, and comes to you each week from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you next week.